Good morning and welcome to the Talk of the Town. My guest this morning is Professor Savitri Goonesekere, Emeritus Professor of Law, University of Colombo. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Professor, independent institutions are a key element of democracy, the rule of law, separation of powers. Just yesterday, it was announced that a select committee will be appointed to inquire into the Constitutional Council due to delays in approving appointments. Speak to us about the implications of this decision.
So, Nali, this is very serious because the Constitutional Council is it's incorporated in the Constitution itself as a body which has been recognized as the body that will have oversight on high posts to ensure that they conform to what is expected of such appointments in relation to the rights of the people in the Constitution. So the record of service, etc., and they would have their guidelines. They have their guidelines and they would follow those guidelines and they would decide accordingly. Now, if you have then another parliamentary process to question this institution that has been set up with the task of auditing the appointments made to conform to what is expected, then that is an undermining of this whole concept of the executive not being all powerful. Because the point of the Constitutional Council is to have scrutiny on appointments. And therefore the executive, if it's dissatisfied, can't go to Parliament and have another process, because what you're doing is undermining the whole concept of the Constitutional Council.
So what then needs to be done?
Well, in this instance, we don't know what happened. And I think that's also not a good thing. I think the Constitutional Council is an important body, just as much as the Human Rights Commission and other independent commissions are. And we should know who voted, who abstained, and who voted for and against. And we know that they also have been responsible. And we can see, for example, if it's split, clearly there's no consensus because they should arrive at consensus. And if there's no consensus, that means that there's a serious problem with the names recommended for the appointment. So that is one thing that should be done. In other words, it should be in the public domain. Who said what or who did what. Then the public also is in a position to decide whether their position is valid, right? And then the president, in his role as president, has to back down. And he's got to send some other names. Because the whole point is consensus in the Constitutional Council is necessary to ensure that the appointments are not political, for instance, that they conform to standards, etc. So if the Constitutional Council is either split or it rejects, then the president has to take the next step of sending some other names, because it is clear that whatever he has said is not acceptable. Now, if you have another process where a majority in parliament has this other process of a select committee, then obviously the opposition will not participate. But what you will have is another erosion of the foundational values of democracy.
The recent Supreme Court judgment with respect to attributing accountability for the current economic crisis that led to bankruptcy, we saw accountability being attributed for misuse of power in decision making to identified individuals, including the former president and former prime minister, among others. Speak to us about the significance of this judgment.
It's significant in terms of what the basis of the decision was, because it interpreted equality as equal protection of the law. And so therefore brought a broader concept of what happens as a violation. It also reiterated the concept of public trust, which has been in the jurisprudence of our country, but sometimes is lost in some decisions that are made. So here it's very, very central. Public trust is you take office, you fulfill it according to the need to fulfill that trust. And if you don't, you are accountable. This is not a criminal liability, but it's a serious violation of the fundamental rights of the people. And therefore, it is a worst kind of governance. So it's a worst kind of governance. That is, you have decision making which violates the fundamental rights of the people. And the other point is that the rule of law, the concept of law and the rule of law is linked to this foundational idea of protection of equality and equal protection of the law. And therefore, if you, for instance, play around with serious issues like economic management and cause deprivation to the people, then that's a serious violation. So it's a judgment which questions basically governance that is bad, and indeed is posing to the people the question, should governance that is bad be perpetuated? That's a question.
What do we do with this judgment that is in black and white?
I think that the judgment, it's unrealistic to expect that there'll be any follow-up. We saw the spectacle in Parliament and therefore it's going to have a very negative reaction within government, in parliament. And it's unlikely that the opposition could do more than raise issues and objections. But the people, I think, can now look at this judgment and make a decision for themselves and say, we have had governance which has caused all this suffering for all of us. We do not want this continued governance. We don't want these people to decide the future of us and our generations, whether it's in debt sustainability, debt recovery, or whatever. The time has come to say we need elections and we need to exercise our vote.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Savitri Goonesekere, Emeritus Professor of Law, University of Colombo. Thank you for your time. Thank you, and it's back to the studio.